People look at me, that W is really important. Worked hard to get that Google ranking, damn it.
We also have the link to your Amazon page as well.
Sweet. What's my star rating at this point?
That I don't know. I just grabbed the link this morning.
Okay. I hadn't looked at it in months. So.
Okay, pushing us live now. Hey, welcome to Tidewater Horror Con. We have the panel coverage provided by Toking with the Dead and the Dorkening Podcast Network. And we're about to go live, and here we go. We are live. Welcome, Chuck.
Can you hear me? Right. Okay. Okay, so for whoever doesn't know, actor and author, primarily at this point, known for the book Family Man, which is a historical fiction based on the Manson case. I spent 8 years researching the case, went back to the original police reports, talked to a lot of people that were involved in the case in the late 60s, early 70s. Talked to people that were very close to members of the family, did speak with one real family member, who asked me not to tell who they are. See, I did good there, didn't I? I didn't even identify gender or anything. So, but mostly it was second or third generation people that I talked to. Talked to a bunch of people. I do not consider myself an expert on the case. I consider myself very knowledgeable about the case. There are people that are experts, have devoted 25, 30 years of their lives to this case. I devoted about 8 and did other things at the same time. So, but there are people that literally have spent 30 years, 50 years obsessed with this case. Luckily, a lot of those people did talk with me and share a lot of their info. So I got a lot of the info in my 8 years that some of these people gathered over 15, 20 years. So a lot of great sources. This case can, if you've read anything, let me guess, who's read Helter Skelter? You hadn't read Helter Skelter? You saw the movie? Okay. Okay, so what's your interest in the Manson case? Okay. Okay. Most people think that Helter Skelter is the Bible of the Manson case because it was written by Vincent Bugliosi. Helter Skelter is Vincent Bugliosi's version of events. He is the prosecutor, of course. It was not his job to find the truth or to tell the truth. It was his job to get a conviction. That's what he did. There's been a lot of stuff came out on Bugliosi since then, where he has blackmailed people, where he actually got reprimanded by the judge several times and found in start a race war. So have I lost any of you so far? Anybody going, wait a minute, I didn't know that? Because if you know the Helter Skelter narrative, of course, the Helter Skelter narrative is that Manson brainwashed all these young people, turned them into mindless zombies, sent them away on killing sprees because he wanted to start a race war between the black and the whites. He wanted to go to the hole in the desert and emerge later and rule the world because the blacks were going to be too stupid to rule the world. So they had to come to Charlie because he was going to be the master. Okay. That's the Helter Skelter story in a nutshell. How stupid does that sound? When you hear it like that, how stupid does that sound? And that's what got me started on the case, and what got me started researching the case. Is I was fascinated by Helter Skelter. I saw the movie when I was like 7 years old, scared the crap out of me, couldn't wait to see it again. So read the book probably at 8 or 9. Of course, like everyone else, believed this was exactly what happened. This was exactly truth, and it had to be because the prosecutor didn't know anything. None of those things is correct. He didn't have to know anything, and he didn't have to tell the truth. He had to get a conviction. So I imagine most of you here because you're interested in serial killers, right? Yeah, it's okay. We're all freaks here. It's fine. And lots of people. Manson, your favorite serial killer? Good. So, definition of a serial killer. Typically a person who murders 3 or more persons, with the murders taking place at multiple locations with a significant period of time, usually at least a month between the murders. A mass murderer. Act of murdering a number of people, either simultaneously or over a relatively short period of time. The FBI defines it as 4 or more people being murdered. A spree killer, 1 or 2 individuals who kill at 2 or more locations, usually almost immediately with no break or very little break between. So if you wanted to put Manson in that category, he would be a mass murderer, not a serial killer. The problem with that is Manson never killed anybody. So yeah, so in Natural Born Killers, when, who's your favorite? Charlie, he's the king. Okay, misnomer. He doesn't even qualify. So we got that out of the way. Tex Watson and Patricia committed multiple murders at multiple locations. The only other one who could possibly qualify is Linda Kasabian, who was the witness for the prosecution, who got complete immunity and released from everything. She was at both the Tate and the LaBianca houses, claimed she never went inside. There is evidence she did go inside. The knife found in the seat cushion at the Tate house, everybody familiar with the knife found in the seat cushion at the Tate house, was always said to be Susan Atkins' knife. It was Linda Kasabian's knife. Could Susan have borrowed it from Linda? Sure. Could Linda herself have had it? Yes. There's pictures of Linda before she even showed up at the ranch with the knife that was found in the cushion at the Tate house. So at least shed some doubt on whether she was inside or not. And if she was inside, that takes away all of the prosecution saying she's our witness because she was outside and she never participated. There's also some belief that she was one of the originators of why they were at the Tate house. She and Tex Watson hooked up like this as soon as she arrived. Linda had only been at the ranch for a little over right at a month. Manson says that he only saw her in passing a couple of times. Take that for what it's worth. Again, if Manson is sending out a kill squad, would you send, okay, Tex Watson, we can see, former high school football player, big guy. Why send 300-pound girls with him? If you're picking a kill squad, are you going to send 300-pound girls with penknives? Does that sound like a zombie kill squad to you? Like some of this stuff you hear, when you hear it at Helter Skelter, you just, oh, yeah, I believe it. But then you get these details and you're going, a lot of this stuff doesn't make sense. Because he had other guys at the ranch. He had multiple other guys at the ranch. If you're going to go in and not know how many people you're going into a house to supposedly, wipe out everybody there, why are you going to send one guy with one gun and that a revolver at that? Now, it was an 8-shot revolver, not a 6-shot revolver. But still, you're going to send one guy, one gun, 3 girls, 3 knives. Anybody know how Bruce Lee relates to the case? Did you know that Bruce Lee relates to the case? Of course you didn't. Hollywood relates to the case a lot. Hollywood and rock and roll of the 60s relate deeply into the Manson case. Manson was deep into the Hollywood culture. They distanced themselves from him for obvious reasons, but very deep. My notes are, I have no idea where I am in the notes now. So Bruce Lee fits into the case in the way that Bruce Lee was Jay Sebring, the hairstylist that was killed at the Tate House. Bruce Lee was Jay Sebring's karate instructor. Jay Sebring is the one that got Bruce Lee involved in Hollywood. He helped him get his first job as Kato in the Green Hornet. So that was, if it, not for Jay Sebring, Bruce Lee may never have got involved in Hollywood. Jay Sebring was very well known in the Hollywood circles. He was the hairdresser to the stars. He did Paul Newman, Yul Brynner. Think about that one if you know who Yul Brynner is. The hairdresser to the stars to a bald guy. Okay. Jay Sebring was also known as the Candyman. So not Sammy Davis Jr., but Jay Sebring. He also did Sammy Davis Jr.'s hair, by the way. But yeah, he was also known as the Candyman or the drug dealer to the stars. So Sebring was a former Navy guy. He opened a salon and he lived in a mansion. He charged in 1967 was charging $50 for a haircut. Good money. Probably not mansion money. So just a little aside there. Let's see, where am I? Okay. Okay. So most of the story that became Helter Skelter, that became the official narrative, came from Susan Atkins. So came from her grand jury testimony. Lots of evidence that her grand jury testimony was coached. Also a chance that her testimony was basically written by Vince Bugliosi and her defense attorneys. Her defense attorneys were, she was appointed a guy named Richard Caballero. Let me make sure I got this right. Yep, she was appointed Richard Caballero. Richard Caballero was no one particularly, wasn't that big a Hollywood lawyer, but he was partners with a guy named Paul Caruso, who was a huge Hollywood lawyer, who charged at the time 4 and 5 figures for his representation. Somehow this guy ended up representing Susan Atkins. Okay. How did Susan pay him? Did he need the fame? No, he had already represented Zsa Zsa Gabor, Audie Murphy, LA Rams players, several boxers, Jane Russell. So why is this guy representing little waif hippie girl Susan Atkins? And how is she paying for it? Another little interesting thing is he represented a guy named Eugene Massaro, who was partners to a guy named Joel Rostow. Heard any of either of those names? Those names are very integral to what happened. By the way, Gino and Joel were partners in an MNDA drug trade business. He represented Eugene Massaro in the murder of Joel Rostow. They never solved Joel's murder. Joel was found in a trunk at LAX, in the trunk of a car. And the way this thing runs in circles over and over and over. Later in the 70s, there was a lot of rock and roll management that was convicted of a ticketing scheme through LAX for airline tickets. They were forging airline tickets for a lot of the big Hollywood stars and about a lot of the rock stars. And they were running this out of the Franklin Avenue apartment complex. Franklin Avenue apartment complex figures highly into this case multiple times. Charlie, when he was released from prison, let's see, at what point was Charlie? Like I said, I'm all over my place on my notes here, so we're bouncing back and forth. But when Charlie was released from prison in Terminal Island in the early 60s, like 65, he ran basically pimped ran an escort service called 5 Star Enterprises out of the Franklin Avenue apartment complex. Okay. The first murder, everybody familiar with Lots of Papa? Okay, Lots Papa was the kind of the first domino that started all the things happening. He was a drug dealer that got burned by Tex Watson and Linda Kasabian, or mainly Tex. Take that back. Wasn't Linda in this case. Tex Watson and Rosina Kroner, who was Tex's girlfriend at the time. And Charlie ended up shooting him to protect the ranch, supposedly. So, okay, I'm way ahead of myself. Let me come back. Okay, so Caballero and Caruso collaborated with a guy named Lawrence Schiller to write what ended up basically being the approved narrative for the Tate LaBianca murders. It was published supposedly only overseas as The Killing of Sharon Tate. So this was before the trials or anything. This was right after her grand jury testimony. It was supposed to only be released overseas. It ended up in the LA Times the next week. So Lawrence Schiller, strangely enough, was also present for the deathbed confessions of Lee Harvey Oswald and Jack Ruby. Lawrence Schiller got around. Let's see. Day Shin, the lawyer who represented Susan at the trial, ended up writing, stated that Caruso, Caballero, and Bugliosi conspired to invent Susan Atkins' testimony. Everything since for the Helter Skelter narrative has been based on that testimony. So even Susan's lawyer, so this isn't a new theory. This is Susan's lawyer in 1969 presented this theory that her whole testimony was made up by her previous lawyers. Caruso was also a close friend of Evel Younger, who was the district attorney, who was also good friends with the governor of California at the time, who was Ronald Reagan, who was good friends with the president of the United States at the time, who was Richard Nixon. Those guys were all golfing buddies. A big part of what got Manson to be the figure is the fact that they wanted to end the hippie movement. This was at the height of Vietnam. Things were going really badly. What better symbol of the hippie culture and to show, look what these terrible hippies do. They burst in your house in the middle of the night and murder people than Charles Manson. Manson was also purportedly offered a plea deal that if he would turn evidence on his friends, they would give him 12 years. So how serious was it that Manson was the worst murderer of all time and the devil? Okay. Gary Fleshman, Linda Kasabian's attorney, has admitted and still will, it's on video, that when he got the deal for Linda Kasabian to turn state's evidence, that Bugliosi handed them a sheaf of papers about this thick and told Linda that the deal was she would get complete immunity as long as she told the truth. Here is the truth. Handed her the papers. Here's the truth. Also, a lot of people don't know, and again, I kind of wandering all over the place, but something pops in. I'm like, oh, they need to know this. So once you are convicted of a crime, at least in California, and I think it's most places, but I know for sure California, once you are convicted of a crime, that is the acknowledged truth. If you hope to get parole ever, you cannot go against what you are convicted for, whether it's true or not. If you were convicted of killing someone with a spoon and you told them later, no, I used a fork, you're going to immediately get denied parole because you have changed the official narrative of the court records. So that's why people go, well, why hadn't any of these people told the truth? Why hadn't they changed it in these years? Because they want to get out of prison. Would you change? Oh, I'm going to tell the truth. I'm going to tell my whole story. Not that they're getting out anyway, because they're still political prisoners, basically. The average sentence for someone who gets life in prison for murder in the United States, anyone have a clue? 15 years. Leslie Van Houten, who, as far as they know, was only involved with the Tate LaBianca. She was only there at Tate LaBianca, or I'm sorry, at the LaBianca house. So she wasn't there at Tate at all. She was there at LaBianca's. She thinks that she said that Tex Watson made her. Again, that's his story versus hers, but it has been corroborated by Susan Atkins. that she was forced to stab Ms. LaBianca, but she thought she was already dead at the time. She may or may not have already been dead at the time, but she was under the impression that she was. Whether she was or not, she deserved to get convicted of murder because she participated. However, there have been multiple people who have done that or worse that have been released for years. She's still in prison 50 years later for participating in one murder when she was 18 years old. That's a political prisoner. She has been recommended for parole by the parole board 7 times. The governor of California has reversed that recommendation every single time because he has political aspirations to be president. Same thing with Bruce Davis. Bruce Davis has been recommended multiple times for parole. The governor keeps turning it down. Why do we have parole boards if we're not going to listen to them? In the time that Leslie has been in prison, I'm not rah-rah. Well, I kind of am rah-rah Leslie, actually. In the time that Leslie has been in prison, she has had 0 complaints against her in 50 years. She has been the perfect model prisoner for 50 years, yet she still gets her case turned down because Governor Newsom says that she's still a threat to society at 77 years old or whatever, 70 plus years old with 0 problems the entire time she's been in prison. So, okay, let's see. That's the foundation, I think. So now we can actually start talking about Manson. So I cover in Family Man, I mostly, and if anyone wants a copy, I've got a few here, and then of course at my table. So come see me, and we'll take care of that for you. The book basically takes place between 1967 and 1969. I don't tell a lot of Manson's past in there. It is a first-person account by a fictional member of the family. A lot of the conversations in there between the fictional character and Manson or Manson's actual words that I got from interviews and listening to smuggled cell phone conversations from prison with people I know and who are nice enough to share those with me. Listen to around 11 hours worth of those conversations. Sometimes, of course, Manson's babbling incoherently and making very little sense. Sometimes he tells you a lot of stuff. So a lot of the story in here is also Manson's version of events. So let's see, just to give you a brief, most of you probably know these things, but just to let you know for sure, just brief. Manson was born no name Maddox, so they didn't even give him a name when he was born. November 11th, 1934. A lot of people think of his birth date as November 12th. That is, they wanted to do that because of November 11th being, what is it, Veterans Day or whatever? Yeah. So because of it being Veterans Day, they didn't want to associate Manson's birthday with Veterans Day, so they've been reporting it as November 12th. Why would our media ever lie to us? I don't get it. So he also died as Manuel Reyes. They were afraid of anybody knowing that he was in the hospital and stuff, so they gave him a pseudonym so that people wouldn't know, even though there was 5 guards standing outside the door for an 83-year-old man with cancer. But he was listed as Manuel Reyes in the hospital and died November 17th of 2017 at 83 years old, just over a year after Vince Bugliosi died. And when he was sentenced to death, just an interesting little tidbit, Bugliosi said, you know, oh, Charlie, you're going to the gas chamber. And Charlie said, I'll be here longer than you will. Manson outlived him by a year. Just an interesting little fact. His mother was a 16-year-old named Kathleen Maddox and a man named Colonel Scott. Colonel Scott was actually the guy's name. He was not a colonel in anything. That was his literal name. And later, Kathleen married a guy named William Manson, and that's where Charlie got his last name. So he didn't even have a real name until he was, you know, a couple of years old. So his mother was convicted of robbery in 1940. Her and her brother, I think, I want to say brother, robbed a man and actually used a ketchup bottle. Stuck a ketchup bottle in the pocket as a gun. The guy didn't give him the money. They hit him over the head with a ketchup bottle. So she was sentenced to 5 years in prison. Charlie was 6 years old at the time. He lived with grandparents, and an uncle bounced back and forth between them. As a punishment for him crying and being upset about something, his uncle called him a sissy and made him wear a dress to school. Nice guy. Good start for a 6-7-year-old boy, right? So we went back to his mom when he was like 11. When she got out, she had a boyfriend that didn't want him around, so they sent him to a boys' home. He ran away, got arrested for stealing a bicycle a couple of days later. Got sent to another boys' home, Father Flanagan's Boys Town. It's funny, there was even a write-up in the local paper, and shows a smiling Manson there that he was so happy to get sent to Father Flanagan's Boys Town. 4 days later, after being so happy to be given a fresh start, he stole a car and escaped from Boys Town. Committed some armed robberies and stuff on the way. He spent the next 3 years bouncing between 4 or 5 different reformatories. Got married at 20 to a 17-year-old girl named Rosalie Willis. They stole a car and to head to California, got arrested 3 months later. He was sentenced to 3 years at Terminal Island. Do you see how this is going here? Manson was institutionalized most of his life. From the time he was 6 years old till the time he died at 83, he spent somewhere around 60 to 70 years, either in reformatories, boys' homes, or prison. While he was in prison the first time, his first son was born, a guy named Charles Manson Jr., who later changed his name to Jay White and later committed suicide. If you've been keeping up with the fiasco that is the trying to settle his estate, which has been going on for 3 years now, and who knows, there's no end in sight. If you've been keeping up with that, Jason Freeman, who says he's his grandson, says that Charles Manson Jr. is his father. There's debate of whether Charles Manson Jr. was married to his mother at one point, but there's a lot of debate of whether that was before or after his birth. A lot of people think it was after. So that's one of the reasons there's turmoil about whether he's really even a blood descendant or not. Now, Charlie's real son, blood descendant that we know for sure was Mary Bruner's kid, who was called Pooh Bear Mike Bruner, who is a wonderful individual. Talked to him several times. Great guy, nicest guy in the world. He was cut out of the estate because in California, if you are adopted, you are no longer the child of your original parents. So even though he was the born heir and literally he should have gotten everything, because of some stupid law, because of him being adopted, cut him out of having anything. So all these people that may or may not even be related are actually the ones that are fighting over Manson's estate at this point. And like 2 weeks ago, some guy that nobody had ever heard of before now says that he's his son. So who knows where that one's going to end. That's a saga in and of itself. But everything with Manson is a saga. So, and like I said, rabbit trails, you can go in any different direction. So let's see, May 59, he stole a check from a mailbox for $37.50. He ended up getting a 10-year sentence because of not the fact that it was a $37.50 check, but the fact that he stole it from a mailbox, which made it a federal crime. They ended up postponing or suspending the sentence because a girl named Leona said that she was pregnant and she was in love with him and they were going to get married. The judge suspended the sentence. 6 months later, Manson got arrested for crossing state lines for the purposes of prostitution and had to serve that 10-year sentence. So he made comments often that he was the only person in history to ever serve 10 years for stealing a $37 check, which is probably true. While he was in prison, He learned to play the guitar. His main guitar teacher was a guy named Alvin Creepy Carpus, who had been a member of the Ma Barker gang. So he was so that was his mob connection that he made in prison, along with a few others. But Creepy Carpus was the first one that also helped him get involved in the Hollywood music and movie scene when he got out of prison, because allegedly lots of well-dressed Italian men were involved in Hollywood at that point. So Carpus had some connections. He called him, hey, this is my guy. He's getting out of prison. Can you hook him up? He got paroled. This was when he famously said he didn't want to get out. But it wasn't like, oh, I'm too dangerous for society, which is what a lot of people look at. It was like, I don't have anywhere to go and I don't know anything else. I've been in prison 50 years, 40 years. Let me stay here. Well, at that point, it would have been about 25 years. So 3 at the time. So he moved to Haight-Ashbury District in San Francisco, met Mary Bruner, and the group that was known as the Family officially began. Now, I'm going to use the term the Family just because everybody's familiar with it and knows what I'm talking about. Fact is, there wasn't such thing. They never referred to themselves as the Family. The Family was originated by the Bugliosi trial and by the media. They never once, when they were in the group commune, never once did they refer to themselves as the Family. They considered themselves a family. So if people said, oh, they might have said, oh yeah, this is my family, but they never, we're the family. Come join the family. They never. Also, and I go into way more detail, obviously, than I can go to in 20 minutes, 30 minutes, or 2 hours, or whatever we're going to spend here. I probably need to keep track, don't I? Ooh, yeah. So, we good? Okay. Okay. Oh, man, we can do this stuff all day. What you talking about? We could be here that long. No, we're not going to be here that long. We are not going to be here that long. But this stuff is interesting. I mean, you can really, I dug into it 8 years. Like I said, there's people that have dug into it 40 years, 50 years. So I'll go into a lot more detail in the book. So some of these things, if you need to know more about it, let's see, where were we? Oh, we started with the Family, right? What a lot of people know as a story, everybody's heard about Manson hanging himself on a cross in the desert, right? Claiming to be Jesus, all this stuff, gathered the group of cult followers. The problem is, all of that is based on the story of a man named Krishna Venta that happened in Box Canyon, which was about 10 minutes down the road from Spawn Ranch, and it happened about 20 years earlier. The cross that Charlie supposedly hung on was not there in the 60s. It was already gone. So the cross Paul Watkins claimed that Charlie hung on was from the story of Krishna Venta, because that group was still around at that point, and they would visit the Venta group. It was called the Fountain of the World. So the Fountain of the World is really where the Manson family story and the Charlie as Jesus cult leader came from. If you read the Krishna Venta story, you can Wikipedia for that matter. You'll see the parallels and go, wow, this is the Manson story. The problem was, like I said, 20 years earlier. Krishna Venta ended up getting blown up by some of his followers, by the way, which is fitting in and of itself, I think. Let's see, moved to LA after they left Haight-Ashbury. Haight-Ashbury went from being peace and love to being a lot of violence and a lot of hard drugs overnight. Charlie was very anti-hard drugs. And a lot of people probably didn't know that. He was all for anything natural. Grass was fine. Mushrooms were fine. LSD was fine. But anything manufactured, cocaine, heroin, any of that, he totally forbid and would not touch. And he didn't want anybody around him doing hard drugs. Where Tex Watson comes in. Tex Watson and Patricia Krenwinkel, or both, and Susan Atkins, sorry, were both doing speed the night of the Tate murders. So they kept a baby food jar hidden under the boardwalk at Spawn Ranch because Charlie wouldn't let it be out open. He, like I said, he only went for natural drugs. So they kept their speed underneath the thing. Let's see. Also, Charlie had been asked to consult on a film that they were supposedly making at Universal Studios about the second coming of Christ. Never happened. Supposedly the reason they asked him was because of his Bible knowledge, that he could quote so much Bible verses and stuff. Again, a lot of that gets tied into the mythos. Dennis Wilson from the Beach Boys was very tight with Manson, a lot tighter than most stories. If you even knew that Dennis Wilson was involved, that's something that's come out more recently. It was barely touched on in Helter Skelter. It was a big part of the actual reasons for the crime. Some of that narrative has changed here lately, in the fact that they said, oh, they were at Terry Melcher's former house, which was Cielo Drive. Terry Melcher, Doris Day's son, was a big-time record producer in the late 60s. And friend of Dennis Wilson's. Dennis Wilson, a guy named Greg Jacobson, who was a talent scout for Terry Melcher, and Terry called themselves the Golden Penetrators. It was their goal to screw as many girls as possible. A lot of people say that Dennis Wilson hung out with Charles Manson for the drugs and for the girls. You're Dennis Wilson. You're the drummer of the freaking Beach Boys, one of the biggest bands in America in the late 60s. Do you really need Charles Manson to hook you up? But that's the story. Dennis hung out with them because he wanted the drugs and he wanted the girls. Again, think about these things. Don't take what they tell you as being the truth. Because I don't think Dennis Wilson needed anybody to hook him up with babes. I think he could have probably scored as many chicks as he wanted on his own, and they probably looked better than the girls at Spawn Ranch. And the drugs were probably higher quality. So Dennis was a real admirer of Charlie. He called him the Wizard. He thought he was amazing. He thought his music was just the greatest thing in the world. He wanted to use Charlie's music. He wanted him to record for Brother Records, which was the Beach Boys label. He even went so far as to hook him up with Brian Wilson, his brother, and they did a recording session at Brian Wilson's home studio with Manson. 2 people have ever recorded at Brian Wilson's home studio. Brian Wilson, Charles Manson. Those tapes have yet to surface. Probably got destroyed after. Oh, we don't want this evidence around. But Terry Melcher did. People go, oh, he was a wannabe musician and he got rejected by Terry Melcher and this was revenge. He went to Terry Melcher's old house and told him to kill everybody there as revenge for Terry Melcher not making him a rock star. The problem with that narrative is that Terry Melcher did record Manson. And he recorded him with a group of musicians called the Wrecking Crew, who were the best studio musicians in LA at the time. They recorded most of the music you hear was recorded by the Wrecking Crew in the late 60s and early 70s. Paul Revere and the Raiders, the Beach Boys, on and on. These guys were the musicians that played, because as a musician myself, I can tell you, the longer you're in the studio, the more money it costs you. And a lot of musicians who are great live don't deliver in the studio. These guys, they do nothing. So the record company could be a lot cheaper and the music could be a lot tighter and a lot better when they use this group of professional musicians. In the past few years, this was denied for years. Never happened. Rumor never happened. In the past few years, several members of the Wrecking Company have come out and said, yes, it happened. We did record this. We were told not to for years. But let's see. So what started a series of dominoes started. I got to get through this. We're running behind. So a series of dominoes kind of led to the TLB murders, TLB, Tate LaBianca murders. Summer of 69, Tex Watson, his girlfriend Rosina Croner, set up a drug deal with a drug dealer named Lots of Papa, Bernard Crow. They were supposed to give Crow $2,000 worth of grass. Crow gave Tex the money. Tex said, well, I didn't bring it with me. I'm going to go get it. But tell you what, my girlfriend can stay here with you as collateral. I'll be right back. Tex took the $2,000 and never showed back up. Crow wasn't happy with that. $2,000 in 1969 is $16,000 today. So Crow calls the ranch and says, listen, I'm going to kill this woman and I'm going to come kill everybody at your ranch. Supposedly, he said this. There's some, just like with everything, there's debate on this. But so instead of getting Charles Watson when he called the ranch, he got Charles Manson. Manson said, whoa, brother, let me see if we can work something out. Manson goes over, takes a gun with him. Manson's a small guy. Manson's like 5'4". Okay. He's been in prison his whole life. All he knows is prison. He knows how to do the prison system. He goes over, tries to work it out. An argument ensues. Manson shoots Lots of Papa in the stomach. Lots of Papa had lots of stomach, even though he claimed that the reason he was called Lots of Papa was for other anatomical parts. So we'll let whoever decide on that. So, but this happened at the Franklin Avenue Apartments. So, what's it? Things run in circles here. The Franklin Avenue Apartments are not there anymore. They're gone. I went by the location. It is right above the Magic Castle, where all the magicians and stuff hang out, or was right above. Right now, there's a parking lot there. So anyway, from there, Manson shot him, thought that he had killed him. At that point, Manson starts getting really paranoid because now he thinks he's killed someone. He didn't mean to kill anybody. He was trying, supposedly. But now he feels like he's been forced to kill someone to take care of Tex. You know, he paid Tex's debt. A Black Panther was found dead in the park, was reported on the news. Some people thought that it was Lots of Papa that had been reported. Two problems with that. One, Lots of Papa was not dead. Two, Lots of Papa was not a Black Panther. But the family didn't necessarily know that. Lots of paranoia took over. They had a motorcycle gang called the Straight Satans. The Straight Satans came to the ranch because they like drugs and they like girls, and they didn't have what Dennis Wilson had. So they were there for the drugs and the girls. And also for some protections in case the Black Panthers or the law or whoever else came by. Motorcycle gangs were big deterrents to people messing with you. The problem is the motorcycle gangs also brought harder drugs and lots of problems to the ranch. They were having a party to celebrate one of their anniversaries. They wanted some drugs. Bobby Bousselet, one of the members of the family, made an arrangement with them to supply them with some mescaline. This mescaline, although, again, it's disputed, there's a good chance that this mescaline was purchased from a friend of theirs named Gary Hinman. Gary was a music teacher and more than likely also a mescaline manufacturer. When the drugs, again, gets glossed over in the main narratives, but there was traces of mescaline, scales, different things that show that he was probably cooking up mescaline there. He made the deal with Satan's, supplied them. The next day they came back, said the drugs were bad. They wanted their money back. So Bobby and a couple of the girls, again, you're going to kill a kill unit. Here's a guy and a couple of girls. They went to Gary's to try to get the money back for the bikers. A lot of people said that, Gary had had an inheritance. I didn't see anything where they actually thought Gary had inherited anything. There was other things that said that they were just trying to rob him, take his money or whatever. Bobby's story is that, and several others that corroborate it, is that they were trying to get the money back for the drugs that they had gotten for the Straight Satans who claimed the drugs were bad. Now, the family had kept some of those drugs and done them themselves and had had no problems. Were the drugs bad? Were the drugs not bad? They claimed they were. Who are you to argue with a bunch of outlaw bikers? So they went to there. Gary said he had already spent the money. He didn't have it to give back to them. Gary and Bobby get in an altercation. Bobby ends up pistol whipping Gary. They call Manson at the ranch, say, Gary's not cooperating. He's not giving us the money. What do I do? Manson and Bruce Davis go over. That's when the altercation with Manson with the sword, and he cut Gary right across the ear and the side of his face there. Manson claimed he kind of backhanded slapped him with the flat side, but it did it. There's some claims, he just slashed him with it. Either way, it was obvious if he gets him in here that he's not trying to kill him. If you're going to slash somebody with a sword, hit them here. They're gone. So he hits him up high. They make a deal. Gary says he won't call the cops, take his cars. He signs over the pink slips to his 2 cars and says, okay, you can take my cars, see if they can give them to them or sell the cars and get money, whatever. So they've got the deal. The deal's made. Manson leaves. Bruce Davis leaves. Take one of the cars with them. Bobby and the girls stay behind for 2 days. The girls try to nurse Gary back to health. Sewed up his ear with dental floss. You use what you got, I guess. Again, though, it shows they obviously didn't intend to kill Gary. Because if you're going to kill somebody, why are you going to sew up his wound? Why are you going to try to take care of him for 2 days? At some point, another skirmish, Bobby ends up stabbing him. Okay, at this point, whether you intended to do it or not, you've done it. So even though as they were leaving, they heard Gary still breathing, Susan Atkins went back in and smothered him with a pillow to finally kill him. They put made a paw print with his palm on the wall in Gary's blood to try to frame the Black Panthers for doing it. And wrote political piggy on the wall in Gary's blood. Somehow the cops never they finally connected, but it took them close to a year to connect the Gary Hinman case with the other cases that had blood writing on the wall. They kept saying, none of these are related. So Bobby got arrested 3 days later. He was sleeping in the back seat of one of Gary's cars that had broken down on the side of the road. Still had Gary's blood on his clothes, and the bloody knife was in the spare tire compartment of the car. So Bobby didn't have a great defense. Around that same time as Bobby's arrest, allegedly, got to say allegedly on a lot of this, Tex Watson and Linda Kasabian were involved in a drug deal that went wrong at Cielo Drive. At this time, by now, Sharon Tate lives at Cielo Drive, Roman Polanski. Also involved in this deal were our buddies Joel Rostow and Gene Massaro. So there's a circle here. And Jay Sebring, the Candyman, Wojtek Frykowski, who at multiple times listed his occupation as actor, director, writer. Basically, he had no occupation. He was Abigail Folger's boy toy. So he was using a lot, of course, Abigail Folger from the Folgers Coffee fortune. Folgers have totally distanced themselves from Abigail at this point. They pretty much ignore her existence, which is kind of strange, I think. So let's see. But Wojtek wanted to be the big distributor in the area for MNDA. So he got that MNDA from Canada. They imported it from Canada through Rostow, Massaro, and a couple of other people. And he was dealing out of Cielo Drive. If most people that are really into the case and informed will tell you that more than likely Wojtek Frykowski was the reason they went to Cielo Drive. Had nothing to do with Sharon Tate, had nothing to do with revenge for Terry Melcher. Because first of all, A, they knew that Terry Melcher wasn't there anymore. B, they knew where Terry Melcher was. So why, if you're going to put a fear into Terry Melcher, why are you going to go to where he used to live? Why aren't you going to go to where he lives? Again, no sense makes sense. So Tex and Linda were pissed about getting burned on the deal. Now, whether they don't know which way it went. Did Wojtek screw them? Did he not deliver the money for their drugs? Did he not deliver the drugs for their money? Don't know. Was Jay involved in that? Possibly. Don't know. Another good reason to think that Wojtek was the primary victim is that he took the most damage. Everybody had multiple stab wounds, gunshot wounds or stuff. Wojtek was like 80 times, where the rest were in like 12, 20, 18. So a lot more damage inflicted on him, which, at least in my mind, makes you think, okay, this is who the rage was towards. This is was the primary target. There's belief that they did not think Sharon Tate was home. even in one of the trials, I want to say it was Squeaky, one of the girls came by and told Miss Tate, "We are so sorry. We didn't think Sharon was home." Now, again, this is told that they didn't know any of these people, or this was strangers. They didn't know any of these people. There's good evidence that yes, they did know almost all those people, at least in a passing way. Cielo Drive was a party house. It was not uncommon at all for just wanderers, hippies, whatever, to show up there and party with the rich, with the famous. Jim Morrison was there, had been there. You name Candace Bergen was Terry Melcher's girlfriend at the time. So you've got all these Hollywood people there, and then you've got all these just regular old people there. There wasn't the shield between them and us that there are now, that there is now, and that's a lot of the reason. Nobody locked their doors, or rarely did people lock their doors then. So let's see. So we're there. We're at Cielo. Supposedly Joel Rostow had made a drug delivery there early in the day. There's some speculation that Tex knew about this and said, "Okay, I know they just got a delivery. I'm going to get mine." Problem was he didn't leave a lot there. He couldn't get the full shipment. He was planning on coming back later that night. He says he never went back. There's some speculation that maybe he did go back, but he went back after everything had happened and saw it and took off. Also, Manson says that he went back. There's lots of evidence that the bodies were rearranged. Most of Jay Sebring's blood is on the front porch. Considerable amounts of Jay Sebring's blood is on the front porch. And if you look really closely, the shape that Jay Sebring is laying in inside the house is almost identical to the shape of the blood on the porch. There's very little blood where Jay was found, but there's tons of his blood on the front porch, which shows some pretty good evidence that he was killed there. My theory, and a lot of people's theory, even Tex Watson, when they first asked, because the official theory is they took a window screen off and went in through the window. I think they went up and knocked on the front door because I think they were expected, or at least somebody was expected. Good evidence of that is also that even though both Abigail Folger and Sharon Tate were dressed for bed, both Jay Sebring and Wojtek Frykowski were still fully dressed and had their shoes on. So around 11 o'clock or after, you're probably expecting somebody, right? Good chance that the reason you're dressed and have your shoes on is you're expecting somebody to come to the door. I think they knocked on the door. They went to the door. Probably Jay answered the door. And that's where the first altercation ensued. Stephen Parent, the kid that was just happened to be there. And I think he did, in a way, happen to be there, but there's a lot of evidence that was not his first visit. The official narrative is that he was there to try to sell a radio to the caretaker. He had picked him up hitchhiking several days earlier. The guy goes, "Hey, come see me if you ever want to." And he just happened to show up to try to sell him a portable radio. Again, that just doesn't make sense to me. I think he showed up to probably smoke grass with him. The mailman reported that a car very similar to that had been there overnight a few days earlier. So good chance that he was a fairly frequent visitor, that he wasn't just, and he was in the wrong place at the wrong time, but it wasn't as far-fetched that he had been there multiple times and just happened to be there at that time, as opposed to just, this is the first time I've ever been here and darn it, I get killed. There's also evidence that he backed, well, it's pretty much proven that he backed into the fence trying to get out. The official narrative is that he was pulling out and they stopped him at the gate and then pushed the car back to where they found it. That is the official narrative. Stopped him at the gate. He says, "Oh, I won't tell anybody." Why would he say, "I won't tell anybody," if there was nothing to tell? I think there's more evidence that he was actually the last to die instead of the first. I think he probably was at the guest house. He saw the melee going on in the front yard or heard the screams. He ran to his car. He jumped in. He backed up. He hit the fence because the fence is broken and there is white paint underneath his rear bumper, which shows that he hit the fence. So why was he in such a hurry to get out if he didn't see them until he was pulling out? To me, he saw them. He tried to make an escape. Probably walked out, and that's when just happened that's when the screaming, they came running across the lawn. He goes, oh crap, jumps in his car, tries to get out, backs into the fence. As he starts forward, that's when Tex Watson walks up and sticks a gun in his face. The other theory that is, they said, why is the car sitting so weird, crossways and backwards? If he was coming out the gate, as they said, oh, we pushed it backwards out of the way. One, there's no reason to do that. Cielo Drive is extremely, extremely secluded, which is also proof that they didn't go there at random, because you can't find that place at random. Been there. It ain't easy to find. Also, the car was in gear. Why would the car be in gear if they pushed it? If you're going to push a car back just to get it out of the way, are you really going to take your time and reach across a dead body to put it in gear? What's the point? Flat ground. It wasn't rolling anywhere. So, like I said, a lot of that just doesn't make sense. Why did you do that? Okay, so the next night, of course, they go to La Bianca's. So Charlie says he went back that night to rearrange stuff and to try to clean up. He asked Tex Watson, did you clean up? Did you make sure you didn't leave fingerprints? Of course, Tex, no. So Charlie goes back and tries to clean up. Of course, they do miss some fingerprints. There's also evidence of, there's some glasses there. More glasses than there are people in the house. So again, gives you the impression that possibly there were guests. Maybe the killers were guests. We don't know. Also, there was stuff stolen from the house. They always said there wasn't. There was. They found some of it later. Linda admitted to taking it herself. There was a silverware that she had taken and hidden down the road. Why'd you hide it down the road? Who knows? Probably go back and get it later. Okay, we're going to get on through here. The next night, Manson says, I'm going to show you how to do it. Takes them to the La Bianca's house, goes in, ties them up, says, we're not going to hurt you. I'm only here to rob you. I think he does that. I think there's some evidence that Miss La Bianca had a house dress pulled over her nightgown. I think there's some evidence that they went with her to her store. She got money out of the safe and gave it to them. They drove back to the house. I think at that point, Manson goes, okay, we're done here. Let's go. Tex Watson doesn't want to do that. He wants to kill everybody because he don't want to leave any witnesses. He also believes that Mrs. La Bianca is a drug dealer. There's evidence that could be true. There's evidence that maybe it's not true. Also, there's a chance they had partied at the house next door. They had been to the Waverly Drive house before as well. Also, there's some thoughts that Manson may have thought Mr. La Bianca was connected to the mob and was being threatened from the Beach Boys management, made a call. That call supposedly was to the La Bianca house. More things to think about, huh? So, but if what Manson says happened, then that means he got the money. He said, okay, we got what we came for. Let's go. Watson says, no, I'm staying here. I want more. There's more here. Manson says, I got what I came for. I'm out of here. So Manson, Linda Kasabian, and Susan Atkins, Steve Grogan, they leave. Manson goes and goes straight to Venice Beach from there. Even Kasabian says this. Does anybody know what happened to be in Venice Beach in 1969? The Straight Satan's Clubhouse. Manson gave the money back to the Straight Satans. The money he got from the La Bianca's house, he gave to the Satans, said, we're even. Okay, if this was started to be a race war, why did he stop? Why are you going to kill two houses full of people supposedly and stop? Aren't you going to keep going? No race war started. Nobody had even made that connection yet. So if this is your goal, then why do you do 2 nights in a row and stop? Again, doesn't make any sense. They were arrested at Barker Ranch for burning an earth mover. They fled out into the desert. You want to talk about if you wanted to get away, go to Barker Ranch. If they had never burned this earth mover, they'd have probably never found them. This place is in the middle of nowhere. You find the middle of nowhere and you go to the middle of that, there's Barker Ranch. At the time, the Manson trial was the longest trial in American history and the shortest defense. So the trial lasted a little over a year. Does anybody know how long the defense lasted? Okay, I'm going to give you the defense. The defense rest, Your Honor. That was the defense. That was the entire defense. After a year of the prosecution case, that was the defense. Manson had asked to defend himself. The judge said that he couldn't, even though multiple people said that he was very competent. Doctors said he was competent to defend himself. They said that the case was too complex, that he couldn't. Manson wanted to testify in his own defense. They did let him testify. However, they asked that the jury be removed, so he didn't get to testify in front of the jury. The reason that they wanted the jury removed is because they said that Manson would hypnotize the jury with his eyes. So, like I said, didn't get to put on a defense really at all. And that was Manson's biggest problem. I mean, or biggest issue. If you ever listen to any of the interviews with him, he will say, I didn't get my rights. I didn't get to put on a defense. And the truth is he didn't. Would he have still got convicted if he had? Maybe. And I don't think he would have had a problem with it. The fact is, though, he got convicted literally without putting on a defense. Man spent 50 years in prison for what, in my opinion, should have been accessory after the fact in Tate and accessory before and after the Tate and LaBianca, which would have probably gotten him 25 years or less. Instead, he's known as one of the worst murderers in the history of the world. So that's pretty much what I got. Anybody got any questions? I know I didn't cover everything. This case went on for 50 years. I couldn't cover everything. Yes. She is extremely well coached. If you noticed, Vince Bugliosi was with her. She never made a public appearance without him. When I watched it, and I got the feeling that she was wanting to relive being there. That was the feeling I got. Yeah. I don't know. If there's ever going to be a reveal of what really happened, only 2 people can give it, and that's Linda Kasabian and Tex Watson. And Linda is bound by her testimony or her deal. She can never change her story, or that deal can be revoked. She could still go to prison if she changes her story. And Tex, same thing. Tex thinks that he's going to get out one day. Tex is never getting out. Nor does Tex deserve to get out. Tex killed 7 people. Anything else? Of the core group, well, let's see, there's Leslie Van Houten and Patricia Krenwinkel are still in prison. They're still alive. Bruce Davis, Bobby Bousselet are still in prison. Sandra Good and Lynette Fromey, that's Squeaky, they're still around. Steve Grogan, who got released from prison for telling them where they buried Shorty Shea. So he's out. He hasn't killed anybody else. He's lived an okay life, which kind of, to me, shoots the governor's claims of not letting Bruce Davis or Leslie Van Houten out in the foot. Okay, here's a family member that's been out for 25 years and hasn't caused any problems. Linda Kasabian, however, has been arrested multiple times over those years. Just saying. So nobody's going to ask me about the Tom O'Neill book, all right? I figure somebody's going to ask about the Tom O'Neill. The Chaos book. I do not think Charlie had any dealings with the CIA whatsoever. I don't see any evidence of that at all. I don't know. I think Tom O'Neill's an excellent reporter. I think he did a wonderful job unmasking a lot of Bugliosi's issues. To me, if you want my recommendation on Chaos, I say read the first half. Throw the second half away is pointless. To me, saying that Charlie was a CIA operative or involved in the CIA or having anything to do with MK Ultra is basically like saying he was an alien abductor. I mean, to me, it's ridiculous. And I found in all my research and all the people I talked to, I didn't see anything that pointed to any of that. And reading his book, I didn't see that he proved anything. And that was his goal. He spent 20 years trying to prove it. If you spend 20 years trying to prove it and you can't, to me, that tells you it's not true. Anything else? The Beach Boys recorded one of Charlie's songs. They called it Never Learn Not to Love. It was Charlie's version of Cease to Exist. They put it on their 2020 album, and the first time Charlie heard about it, it had already been released and was only credited as Dennis Wilson. So, yeah, and I don't think the credit bothered him as much as the fact that they changed his song. They changed his lyrics. I think that's a big part of why he didn't really make it with Terry Melcher. I don't think it's that he didn't have the talent. I think he didn't have the temperament. Because, you know, like I said, you had these excellent, awesome musicians. Well, he didn't want to use them. He wanted to do it his way. You know, and his way was he might not even bother tuning his guitar. He might change the song in the middle of it and go into a different song. Well, that's not the way the recording industry works. You know? So I think that was pretty much the rift. But I mean, even after, you know, Dennis still went and hung out with him. So did Terry Melcher, who also moved back into the Cielo Drive house after the murders. Interesting fact. What now? Hundreds of thousands. Yeah. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. It's an industry. I mean, it's the most, in my opinion, one of the probably 3 or 4 most fascinating murder cases in history. I mean, to me, the only two that I have been fascinated in is this one and Lizzie Borden, which, if you're interested, I did a documentary from the Lizzie Borden house. It's on my YouTube. So Foam Productions YouTube page, or just look up 24 Hours with Lizzie, and I spent the night at the Lizzie Borden house and did a doc from there. That's the only other case that has intrigued me as much as the Manson case. And I would say would be right there with most people, would be probably Jack the Ripper, Lizzie Borden, and Manson. You know, and if you want to throw a couple more, maybe Night Stalker, maybe Jeffrey Dahmer, but to me, those are a distant, you know, and I think it's just because there's so much doubt and there's so many questions that will probably never be answered. But people like me and people that know way more than me can at least hypothesize based on a lot of the information and go, okay, this seems to be closer to the truth than what we've been given all these years. I mean, you've got what else you want? You got Hollywood, you got rock and roll, you got sex, you got drugs, you got murder. You know, what else is there? Anything else? Okay, cool. If you guys are interested, I have some Manson relics up here. This is a piece of walkway from the LaBianca's house. This is some Manson artwork, of course. And over here, some stuff from Spawn Ranch, Barker Ranch, from the Sharon Tate house. And then there's some actual Charlie handwriting right there on the little church bulletin that came from his cell. So you're free to come up here and take a look at those. And I guess they can end the live stream now. I don't know. Nobody's in here to turn it off. So we can just wave and walk up here and show your butts to the camera, I guess. So
I'll stop the live stream.
Hello, world. Goodbye, world. You sure